anything.
Flowers are beautiful.
Yeah.
So you've talked in many places that I've read about the children's books you read growing up, and Enid Blyton came up quite a bit. And I think that's one thing that the Indian context and children's books really shares in common. But I was just thinking, how do you sort of transition out of that without violently hating them? Those books. I haven't fully managed. So.
No, I think, I think that's a good question. I don't know, but I just did. But it might be because I generally think of literature as a big house with many rooms, right? And I like the idea of many different kinds of stories. So, yeah. So I mean, Enid Blyton was a very important part of my life, and I will never discount that. And those books made me happy. But at the same time, I'm so happy that I discovered other kinds of books. And it wouldn't even have been a problem when I was growing up if I had also read as many books that reflected my experience. I just didn't. And I think that affected the way I approached writing initially. And so I'm really happy that I'm over that. But, you know, those Enid Blyton years were good years.
Wow. I like the poise with which you deal with it. But would you consider writing children's books as...
I would like to, as an idea, but my vision is too dark, so I don't know if I can. I don't know how to, but you know, you never know. Maybe sometime in the future. I like the idea. I think it's a very important. I mean, I think the whole idea of catching them young is fantastic. I wish I could write children's books, but in the next thing you know, somebody will be dying or somebody will be having violent sex or something. So.
So you also grew up around the university environment. I mean, the level of culture capital you get through this university environment. When you first went to the US, you talked about how people were sort of uncomfortable with how much you knew about their culture and Western things. So what was the thing that surprised you most about the US?
About the US?
You really weren't prepared for in terms of stereotypes.
That's interesting. What surprised me the most about the US? I don't know. I think in general, if anything, it was really that they had no idea about my world. Seriously, no idea. But I probably shouldn't complain about that, considering that, I don't think people have an idea in India either. And people stare at me on the streets here, and then a man just asked me, "Do you like reggae because of your dreadlocks?"
God.
And I said, first of all, they're not dreadlocks. There's a difference. This is called twisted hair. It's my hair that's twisted, and he's looking at me like that. Seriously, out there. So maybe I should. But anyway.
No, I mean, I can just say this now. We're horribly racist.
I just found it and it's not a sort of subtle staring. People, Kiri sort of stare. They go like that. I mean, I've just experienced it everywhere, in Delhi, here in Jaipur. But just to go back to the US, actually, I haven't thought about it like that, about what I found most, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's just the idea that you're going to a place where, because of America's cultural power, I watched Sesame Street growing up, and then I was suddenly among people who just had no idea, had nowhere to place me as this African who, shock or shocks, could speak English, Yeah.
Did you find yourself sort of weaving a narrative to combat this, like just an easy way to sort of tell people in your face way, this is where I'm from?
I think a number of things to adapt. I mean, one of the things that I'm most ashamed of is that I then tried to adopt a kind of Americanism, which I have since very happily discarded. But, by my second year in college, I had managed to find ways to say things like, "Can I have the water, please?" Because I wanted to sound as American as possible so that I wouldn't be seen as that different. And when you're a child and you're impressionable, you're a child, 19, 20, and you're impressionable and you just really don't like all that much attention, you find ways to try and compensate. And then later, when I became, I suppose, more, when I just realized there's just no point in trying to be what you're not. Right? So I would say, yes, and then all the questions about Nigeria and Africa. Initially, I was just completely resentful, and then later I realized, for most people, it's really just not knowing. I mean, there's a hostility that you realize is just racist and horrible, but then on the other hand, there's just curiosity that really comes from a place of just not knowing. And that I don't mind. So I sort of say, well, yes, Nigeria was colonized by the British, and we do speak English and all of that, yeah. So it was kind of...
So in the danger of a single story or non-YouTube TED Talk, I mean, you talk a lot about stereotypes in this nice, sort of rich way, productive way. I was just wondering, is Nigeria the place right now in the world you feel most insulated from that?
Insulated
from stereotypes of this?
Yes. Nigeria is where, yes. And I think it comes from just Nigeria being home, right? And that it's where it's where I often say to people, it's where I put down most of my baggage. It's home. And there's so many problems in Nigeria, of course, and I'm constantly complaining about politics, about, why can't people stand in line and all of that, but it's home. So I'm at peace, if that makes sense, yeah.
This sort of literally angle to being home. So in India, writers who spend time abroad and are sort of transitioning are either met with too much excitement or hostility.
Yeah.
What's the scene like for you?
I think that there isn't as much hostility as I've already, just been here for 2 days, I've already sensed that sort of hostility of, Indians writing from abroad and people are telling us what Indian writing should be. We have a bit of that in Nigeria, but it isn't as pronounced yet. I suppose it might get worse. But I think in a case, because I actually spend time in Nigeria, because I actually, have a home in Nigeria, it might be a bit different. And I'm sort of, so it's not just that I live in the US and I write about Nigeria. My family's still there. I go there all the time. I run a writer's workshop in Nigeria. So maybe that's why I might not get that much hostility, but it's there. I mean, there are people who, for example, I know have said things like, the only reason she is read is because she was published by the West and that kind of thing. Or people who have said, she writes for the West. That sort of thing. And it comes with the territory, I think. And it really doesn't bother me very much.
Okay. I'm interested in this teaching writing.
Yeah.
So can you talk a bit, you've also taught writing in the West.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about both those experiences? I mean, basically, what has teaching taught you?
That's actually interesting. I like teaching because it teaches me a lot. I learn from my students, and it's lovely to see. In Nigeria, I think for obvious reasons, I prefer teaching in Nigeria. And it's just seeing people who actually, there's a kind of, for the people who really want to write in Nigeria, there's a raw hunger for it. The people who want to do what they need to do, who just sort of are really, and I think when you're in a society that doesn't really prize literature necessarily, you say you want to write and people tell you, go become a doctor. And so if you're living in that society and you learn and you nurture your love of literature, it comes with this kind of, I see it, I like to call it a hunger, and I see it in a lot of my students who apply to my workshop, and I love that. And in the US, there's less so. Sometimes I feel that what I find is people who want to be writers, but are not necessarily interested in the writing. Because in their minds, I think there's a glamour to being a writer, which does not exist at all in Nigeria. There's no glamour attached to being a writer, and so the people who want to be, you find, are quite happy to do the writing, if that makes sense.
Maybe the question of teaching is related to this question, I don't know, but what are your literary goals? How do you want to evolve as a writer?
My goals?
Yeah, literary goals, or how you want to evolve as a writer, or what
I don't know.
Genres you want to explore. I'm not asking for the specific question you hate, which is what's your new project.
No, but it's not even that. It's also that I really don't know, and I in some ways I don't want to know what my goals are. I think that it's I want to discover as I go along, and And then, of course, I could say to you, well, now my goals are to write in every genre. I shall do a science fiction book. I shall do a fantasy novel. I shall do a romance. I shall do. I just want to. I wish I could. I'd like to. I think in general, I just want to write. I mean, I want to do the best I can. I want to keep writing. I think, if anything, my greatest fear is that one day I might not be able to write at all. And if I can just write, then I'm happy. And I'm going to write some, hopefully some books that are not wonderful, and hopefully some books that are. And that's just really it. I just want to be able to continue to write.
So I'm just interested in your experience writing short stories versus writing novels. Do you have any preferences?
No.
How did each?
I think both are very different forms, and I think both are equal forms. I mean, I've never seen the novel as sort of the big brother or the big sister. I like short fiction because of, and it can take me quite a while to write a short story, years sometimes, because I leave it alone because it's not working, and then I go back to it. But there's a sense in which a short story, when it's done well and I like it, there's a wonderful immediacy to it. And also as a reader, I like short stories that walk because you do so much in such little space. It's just, it's a different and an incredible thing. Novels obviously take more time and are longer, but I suppose, the process for writing both are different, but I think I enjoy both equally. Yeah, and also as a reader, I like both equally. I love to read short stories and I love to read novels.
A little while earlier, you talked about the possible hostility you can feel for being published in the West. But I'm actually interested in that publishing market. Because, for writers in the third world, you're often, I think you're writing about it, but you're often pitched in this, they're often pitched in this, look, here's ancient wisdom and recipes. From Africa, South America, India, whatever.
Yeah.
And your writing really avoids that. But what do you feel about the market?
No, I think that there's some African books that I just will never read. There's some books that there's a certain kind of book that I'm just not interested. And those books do fantastically well, often outside of Africa, and I have no interest in them. But I also understand that I guess it feeds into something people need. Otherwise, people wouldn't buy them. And people should buy whatever they want to buy. But it's not my thing, and I'm not interested. And I think that the question of that whole hostility and whatnot. I think, and it's not just me. The Nigerian writers who are published outside Nigeria, but I read in Nigeria. And I really read, and so you realize, Nigerians are not stupid. They know what I mean. So if they're reading those books, it's not just that because some white man told them this is a good book. People are not stupid. It's because they actually find something worth reading in those books. And there are also the other kinds of books that are often the foreigner writes in Africa. It's either some sort of, exotic, maybe it's a travel thing, and then they do the elephants and the lions and the giraffes. And I don't see anybody in Nigeria reading those books because they're not interested. So, I think people also know what they like.
And do you want to talk a bit about your literary influences? What do you like to read?
I read everything. Everything good. One of the reasons I wanted to come to India is because I like Indian literature. And one of the reasons I really want to go to Sri Lanka is because I particularly love this novel called Reef by Ramesh Nsukka, which I adored and which just lives in my heart, and that's why I want to go to Sri Lanka. So it just sort of, for me, it's how powerful literature can be. And because I read so much Indian fiction, there's a sense in which I sort of come to India with a kind of confidence. Oh, I know India. I read Arkinayang when I was growing up. Oh, I know India. I've read, and in a sense, I do know it from its literature. This novel called Light in August. It's called Light in August, right? Yeah. No. That's Faulkner. Sorry. Oh Lord, somebody Chatterjee. Do you know who I mean?
Yes, English August.
English August, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Faulkner wrote Light and August. But yeah, that book I also really liked, and really, maybe Jhumpa Lahiri is more Indian American, but sort of I like her writing as well. So just having read Indian literature. And I remember once a friend of mine saying to me, you know, the reason I like those Indian writers, they're like us, she said. And in a way it was funny, but I sort of understood. It was, and the similarities, it's sort of a country trying to get a sense of itself, a very multicultural country. And of course, having had British colonialism in common, and so there are things that are similar. It's in Blyton. It's it's the similarities in yeah.
I read this piece in The Guardian, which I just love. You wrote about Harperley.
Oh yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird. Yes, I love that book as well. And it amuses me when some people sort of are angry about how something about how she has these racist things in the book. I'm like, yes, because she's writing about a racist time. I mean, a novel is supposed to show us. It's not sort of supposed to become some sort of theory of. By writing that book, I think that was a wonderfully anti-racist act, and I love that book, and I think the writing is lovely. Yeah, I really like that book. I think right now probably the American writer who I think James Baldwin will be the love of my life in the American sort of, right now. It might change tomorrow.
but someone from that time, the Harlem.
Yeah, I mean, I have this, in the same way that I have a romance about Sri Lanka, I have a romance about the Harlem Renaissance and their writers, yeah. So I sort of have, I have this sort of wonderful, and there's a novel called The Streets. It's by Anne Petrie, and she's not as well known as many of the other Harlem writers, but it's this sort of really wonderful book about the single woman trying to raise her son, and it's Harlem. It's the 1940s maybe, and what's interesting is how contemporary it feels reading that book, and then you realize it's just really powerful. That book I also love. It's called The Street.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna go look it up.
Yeah, you should.
But do you like genre fiction?
Growing up, I was just talking about this yesterday. Growing up, I read a lot of detective fiction. I read a lot of James Hadley Chase. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think I read.
here, yeah.
So in Nigeria, it's the same. And do they have the covers with half the naked women?
Yes.
So that's what will draw the young boys to the books, because then they will think, and then they'll start reading and realize actually it's not about those covers were just ridiculous, right? But the stories I love them. But something has happened where it's so hard for me now to get into mystery and detective, and I don't know what it is. I just can't. And I've tried. Actually, somebody recommended a book that I'm going to go and read and see if I can get back into. But I haven't in maybe 10 years. I haven't read any detective.
Okay, so the other stuff, fantasy.
No,
romance.
Romance I read growing up. Fantasy was never for me. I mean, I was never Lord of the Rings didn't do anything for me. Never did. Science fiction, not for me. I like mystery. I loved Agatha Christie growing up. I think I read everything by Agatha Christie. My brother and I were just crazy Agatha Christie fans. So I loved mystery. I sort of also loved the sort of more detective, the guy goes and solves the mystery, and then there's the crime and whatnot. And romance, I read every bloody Mills and Boon that there was. I think it's probably the reason why my head is all messed up about things. If I have a daughter, I won't let her read Mills and Boon. But I read those. And now, I just haven't read any of those things in a long time.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 5. There's 6 of us.
Okay. And
no other writers. Is that what you're going to ask?
No.
Oh, okay.
They're all in Nigeria?
We're sort of spread around. Brother in England, sister in the US, brother in the US, sister in Nigeria, brother in Nigeria, parents in Nigeria.
And do you find a way to sort of be like really close?
Oh yeah, we're very close. We're very close. I was sort of giving them updates by text when. From Delhi, I said, we're waiting for Jaipur, and then we get to Jaipur. I'm like, Jaipur is just like Enugu. Enugu is the town close to my hometown. And they sort of send texts back, and we're very close. My family, very close, very close. My dad is in Nsukka, where I grew up, and he's sending me a text saying, I hope Jaipur is good for that sort of thing. And I'm like, well, it's just like Enugu, only that instead of they have cows and we have chickens. And
how is their feedback worked on you with your writing?
My father and my brother are the people who really read my work. The others are just sort of, we're so proud of her, and they don't actually read anything. My father is very good about telling me what he thinks, and I value his opinion because he's a professor of statistics, but he's very astute, without, and in some ways it's more useful for me than people who are literary theorists and have studied literature, because sometimes just getting the feedback of somebody who just reads novels but doesn't know anything about critical theory can be quite good. So I get that from my father, and my brother gives me the sort of clear-cut, no nonsense, I don't understand the story, makes no sense kind of feedback. That's also very useful, because sometimes you're sitting there writing and you think the character is going through a metamorphosis, and my brother's like, this doesn't make sense. And then you think, actually, no, it doesn't. So, yeah. So that's useful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was fun. So no, you should read The Street. It's a really lovely book.
I mean, as you might imagine, I've read, Zora Neale's.
Yeah.
James Baldwin, I absolutely love.
I love it. I think he's fun. And in some ways, actually, I prefer his non-fiction to his fiction.